Hi, it's Jane from the Compassion Project, and I am here with Neil Schori from Aurora, Illinois. He is an incredible person. Neil, I'm so grateful that you have joined me again, second time. First time about a month ago now, we talked about domestic violence, which was amazing. And yeah, I'm just super grateful. Today we are talking about a really important subject, and it's how to find hope in the midst of grief, because a lot of people are going through grief right now. And I was telling Neil that my own faith is a bit challenged right now. So Neil is an incredible person with a heart to serve others and make a difference in the world. And he really, truly is doing that. He's been married to his beautiful wife, Brandy, for 18 years and has three gorgeous daughters. Hannah is 16 and twins, Ava and Mia, are 12. And he has a master's degree in counseling from Lincoln Christian University and has worked as a hospice chaplain and a bereavement coordinator for hospice in the past. Currently, he works as a pastor for Edge Church, and you've been doing that for 13 years. And he has a lot of experience in helping others grieve and find hope and get through bad times. And I reached out to him and we've been chatting. And the main reason I wanted to bring him on is I really, truly have been struggling myself with faith, I guess, because, and I'll just quickly say what happened is there's an incident in Canada, in Brampton, Ontario, 3 days before Father's Day. And I live in Kelowna, Canada, but this was in Ontario, and this beautiful, beautiful family, there was a car accident, and the wife and three gorgeous daughters were all killed. And I honestly, it affected me so much. So Michael Quisello, his name is Quisello, I think that's how you say it. That's the dad. His wife, Carolina, his three daughters, Clara, Lily, and Mia. So they were 6, 4, and 1. Were all killed. I could, honestly, Neil, I could not stop thinking about them. And I literally think I challenged my faith. And so that's why you're here. Aren't you lucky?
Yeah.
To help me out. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah. First of all, thanks for what you do. And second of all, thanks for having me on. This is a great honor to me.
Yeah, I just think it's important to try to help people understand maybe the stages of grief, and for me, I think about that man, Michael. I mean, we're talking 3 days before Father's Day. It's in an instant, his life changed, his entire family. And all I could think about is how does he move forward? How does he, like, how do you still feel like you have a belief in God, and that, like, that can't, people say, oh, it's meant to be. I don't believe in that things are meant to be like that.
I definitely don't either. One of the things that I've noticed in working with people through their bereavement processes is, maybe I should step back. One of the things that I learned in training is that one of the worst things that you can do for someone who's gone through something catastrophic, and grief is catastrophic. It doesn't really matter necessarily exactly what happened, but grief hits us for many different reasons, and it affects individuals in individual ways. And one of the worst things that you can do is give quick responses to someone's grief. When people say things, they come across in a trite way. We don't necessarily mean them to be trite, but I've heard people say, well, it was just meant to be, like you said, or I guess God needed him more than you needed him. And I'm just like, whoa, no, you can't say those things. A lot of it has to do with our discomfort in sitting with people in their grief. And we want to make the situation better because honestly, we're uncomfortable. So I think that people today have a very, very hard time sitting with other people in general. Everything is so fast paced. Everything is 180 or 140 or 280 characters on Twitter. And if anything goes longer than that, we tend to get distracted and we want to tie it up like a sitcom. And grief is not like that. Grief is something that takes you into the deep end of the pool. It's something that you can't hurry, and you can't define exactly what someone else's process is going to look like. So questioning is something that's real. You said it challenged your faith. Of course it did. Of course it did. And there are plenty of good questions that we could get into and conversations around, God and faith and grief. All these are very, very important dynamics.
Yeah, and so I really did kind of look at why it really affected me, that story. Obviously, it's so sad, and I also mentioned to you that, like, my husband is such a kind, loving, incredible man, and he can hear that story and feel very sad, but then he moves on. Where I hold it, and I think about it, and I think about the man, and I think about him going home, and I just so I know that I am lacking faith in some way. And the thing that's interesting, when I look back at my when I was younger, because I was baptized Catholic, we went to church until I was about 6. But then my parents ended up stopping going to church, and so I've always kind of searched for something. And they turned a spiritual journey as they've gotten older. It's been really great for them, and I feel like I've almost been in this, like, not really, like, just trying to figure it out myself.
Sure.
And so
well,
that's where I'm lacking.
Yeah, you said I think you're saying some good things, though. You're certainly on a journey, and you certainly also didn't have any control when you were 6 and your parents stopped going to church. So you're a curious person. You're also very empathic. You have you wear other people's emotions. That's really what you're describing. Your husband hears this. He's kind-hearted. He's a great man, but he doesn't. It doesn't stick deep in him the same way it does you. And we're all designed differently. And I think it's a wonderful thing to have a balance of the way everybody's designed, the way everybody's wired, that some people can carry those heavy emotions and we're designed to, and others, they're the ones that often will help us propel forward. We need a balance of things, because if we were all designed the same way, we'd get stuck. We'd get stuck in holes that were too deep for us, and there'd be nobody to pull us out.
Yeah, it's true. We need to balance each other out and help. I think that's why my husband and I work really well, because he can be more practical and more emotional. But are there, when someone goes through a tragedy, a traumatic loss, like, which would be unexpected, sudden, like what happened to that family, or what happened to Bailey Daugherty, who I did a chat with her. She had lost her leg, and her mom, it was July 5th a year ago. So in a traumatic accident, her life was fine, everything was great, and they were having a great day, and then an accident, she loses her leg, almost dies, loses her mom. Traumatic grief, like, there must be stages. Are there stages to grief that people go through to heal?
Oh, absolutely. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross spoke to the stages of grief, and she was a sociologist and just an incredibly smart person. And she talked about the different stages of grief. Here's the thing, though. The stages of grief that we go through, we go through denial and bargaining and anger and finally kind of reconciling. I think the way many of us think, we want to go through these things in a linear way. So once someone can describe the grief process to us, we think, okay, I'm on stage 1, then I'm going to go to stage 2, and eventually I'm going to be done. I'll be out of it. The reality of life is that it's not nearly as linear as we like to think in the West. Grief is more, I think grief is more understood in the Middle East and in the Far East. I think it's understood in a way that actually approximates more closely what it is, because it's very circuitous. You might take a step forward and then jump 3 steps ahead and then go all the way back to the beginning. It looks very messy. Because the process of grief is messy, and you can be in one stage and you might not go through every single one of them, but you are guaranteed that in grief, you will go through a process. And I often tell people, make sure to grab the hand of someone that you trust a lot, and that's willing to sit with you in that grief. That person doesn't have all the answers. They can't take all the pain away. But as they're with you, they can help you process your grief so that your grief doesn't become complicated. And complicated grief is a completely different thing. Complicated grief happens to approximately 5 to 7% of the population. And it's basically, it's defined as grief when you still have all of the initial symptoms of grief about a year after the event. If life isn't starting to go back to normal about a year after the event, you've entered what's known as complicated grief, and you need far more intensive help. That's definitely not a place that we want to go, because it's harder to break free from that than it is to just walk into that valley with someone that you trust, that you can be in it together. You will come out on the other side, but you'll never be the same.
That's interesting. And actually it's interesting because Bailey, that young girl, she just posted, it's been almost a year since her traumatic event happened, and she posted this beautiful post about how she's feeling. She's back at work, and she's feeling like she's come through this, and she can see, like, you know what I mean, like she's doing so good right now, and it's just about a year.
Sure. It's amazing. Most people will come through it, statistically speaking. The best thing that people can do, just a grief tip, the best thing people can do is not fight it and not try to control it. The best thing that someone can do is sort of go with the grief. There are moments that you wouldn't necessarily think that you're going to have a grief trigger, but something does. You could be, like, for me, when I go on bike rides a lot, that's one way I exercise in the summer. So on long bike rides, every now and then my mind will just wander to my dad, and I'll think about, because we used to take a lot of bike rides together. He's the one that got me involved in it. So sometimes I'll be riding, and all of a sudden I can almost see him riding in front of me, just like he did when I was little. And I just, instead of resisting that, like sometimes you feel like, I don't really have time for this. I don't have time for sadness. I'll just let myself drift and think through the things that my mind is just trying to process, instead of resisting it. Because what I've learned is it will come out one way or another, and it's better to just go with the flow of it than try to resist it and handle it when you kind of feel like it's a more appropriate time, if that makes sense.
How long ago did your dad pass away? Was it
it'll be 5 years in September.
Oh, wow.
So
was that one of your hardest losses for you?
Oh, yeah, definitely my hardest loss. Definitely.
Wow.
Yeah, 5 years ago in September, he died. And it was, I definitely had a couple of months that were just, I was just kind of lost. I went to work about 2 weeks after he died, but I just remember I'd be sitting for long periods of time and I would just stare, and I couldn't remember, like, time didn't seem the same. My sleep patterns were disrupted. There were times when I'd sleep way longer than I normally would, and there were times when I couldn't stay asleep. So grief affects everything. It affects how present you can be. It affects your sleep. It causes anxiety. It can cause all sorts of physiological issues too. So you could have headaches, and a really common one is an upset stomach. These are just some of the ways that grief materializes for us.
Interesting that you just said that, because a really good friend of mine, she just posted this on Facebook. She lost her dad a couple days ago. She just posted, it says, when we lose someone we love, we must learn not to live without them, but to live with the love they left behind. Which I thought was so beautiful. But I talked to her today, and she's been sick to her stomach and having headaches.
Wow.
And she doesn't know if it's related to the loss of her dad. And I'm like,
oh, it very likely is.
Crazy.
Yeah, grief does so many things, and other things are, looking for other ways to cope. So sometimes you'll see people that just they binge eat. Some people will try to escape and binge on Netflix. Other people will escape by drinking more than usual. Other people will just go online and shop like mad. Like, there are all sorts of ways that people seek to cope. And those are understandable because we're human. Those are natural tendencies that we have. But my strongest advice to someone that has gone through a loss is try to resist numbing that, because it won't go away. It'll just go down deeper, and it'll be harder to deal with later. Deal with it now.
So you really have to just go through it. You have to give yourself grace on how long, if you need to like stay in
Yes.
bed for how many days, or there's got to be that you have to experience it. But I don't know. I look at, like, I was thinking about my experience with grief. Like when I was 11, I lost my grandma, which was the very
Yep.
first time I ever even really thought about someone dying. I remember that, so it was more surreal and not understanding it.
Right.
And then when I was 17 years old, a good friend of mine, a girlfriend, was killed suddenly. She was sunbathing in Lynn Canyon Park. Her name was Jackie Whitaker. She was beautiful, full of life, amazing girl, and a 200-pound boulder fell on her. So she was
Oh
killed
my God.
instantly. There's actually a plaque in North Vancouver on Jackie Whitaker.
Wow.
And I was 17. I still feel like she just went on a long holiday.
Wow.
I still
Wow.
feel like she just went away to Europe or somewhere, and I don't think my brain could absorb it then, or I couldn't
Right.
process that.
Yes. That's an interesting, I appreciate you sharing that, because that's not an uncommon thing. Did you go to her funeral, or did she have
Yes.
a funeral? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that normally will help that. But with a traumatic loss at such a young age, it is very, very hard to internalize the permanence of death.
Yeah.
Very, very hard. It is. I've heard many people say that grief does feel like, it makes you feel like you still wouldn't be surprised for that person to walk in and just say, "Hey, it's been a while. How have things been?"
I know.
So I think that's a very common experience.
Yeah. And I've thought about her my whole life. She'll just come into my thoughts, and then
Right.
I had my grandpa and my grandma Billy. My grandma Billy lived to be 96, and I accepted them passing. I loved them. I miss them, but
Right.
my grandma was 96. She lived a full life. And
Yeah.
at the end, she's in the hospital, and it was expected.
Yeah.
So I think you can grieve. I guess I don't want to say it's easier, but I think it is easier because they've lived a full life, and it
Right.
was expected in a way. But then
Sure.
2 years ago, I had a girlfriend, one of my best friends. Her older sister was going through cancer, and she really was very ill, and it was really traumatic. And she had 2 children that she left. That was really a difficult to accept. I
Oh
struggle with
yeah.
that.
Yes. It's grief is different. All of these examples are real grief, but how we process them is different. My grandma died at 97, so I can kind of relate to you with yours, and she was very healthy. She was still a huge loss for me, but I didn't have to process things like I did when I lost a friend when I was 14 to leukemia. It's a completely different experience. Or a friend in high school to suicide. He was there one day, and the next day he wasn't, and suddenly there were counselors all over the school. That's a very different experience. So it is very, very important to recognize that each incident that causes grief, it has its own needs and its own process, and it's not going to look the same. So we can't, even though I would personally love to sort of shoehorn every experience into a box so that I know how to respond to it and know what to expect, I've just realized life is far more complex than that.
Yeah, and I think it's really makes us look at ourselves and our own life. And I think that when something happens, whether you lose someone close to you or you hear of a loss, like I heard of that family, I think it makes you look at your own life and be like, I need to enjoy every single moment and be present when I'm with my grandchildren, when I'm with my family,
Yes.
and grateful for everything, because life is very fragile.
It is. It's so fragile. We just don't know. Nothing more than right now is guaranteed. And
Yeah.
I think the more that we can live our lives in light of that reality, the fewer regrets we'll have whenever that day comes that we leave.
Yeah.
You don't ever hear. I've heard people say this many times before, but you don't hear people say, on their deathbed, well, man, I really wish that I'd gotten that extra promotion that my friend John got. No, you don't. You wish you had more time with your family and with your friends, the people that matter to you the most. So being present, I think, is something that we learn as we go through grief. So I think that's a great point you made.
Yeah. And I mean, yesterday I had a day on the boat with the grandkids, and I was so able to just enjoy every moment of the joy that was
Yeah.
going on. Being around children. So the other thing is, this is an interesting question. This
Yeah.
is more about life.
Sure.
Is all that matters how much we're loved, not how long we're here.
Mm,
So if a child is born and they only live a couple of weeks, or some only a couple of hours, is
right.
it only matter that they were really loved during that time?
Mm,
Or, you know what I mean? Or someone could live like my grandma to 96.
right.
She was very loved. But, and then like my friend Jillian that passed away, she was so loved
Yeah.
too. But then I think it's not the length, whether it's 1 month,
Sure.
55 years, 96, that's how I look at it. Do you think
Yeah.
that's?
Oh, I definitely think so. I'd rather have a far shorter life that was characterized by me loving others as well as I can and also receiving love than to live a very long life that was really more characterized by me being selfish and being around others that care more about themselves. So the length of life, I mean, sure, I'd love a combo of the two if God gives me that choice. I would
Yeah,
love to live a
yeah,
long life full of love. But we don't get to choose that. So what we can choose today is what we're going to do with the time we have.
yeah.
And I would I would I would choose the first option. That would be choice.
So do you think that faith, like it's talking about faith, is it okay? So God doesn't. There's things don't happen because it's God's plan. Is it because we're
Right.
human that things happen to us? These
Uh-huh.
these tragedies, because life is busy and we're human, and then God is there to support the person that's suffering. Is that?
Yeah, I love this question. This I could talk about all day because
How to figure it out?
no, this is so good. Such a good, deep, important question. Because I think often um, people's theological framework sort of wraps around this idea that bad things should not happen to good people. We sort of like, oh, they were so good. They did so many good things. Why did a bad thing happen? My theological framework is that we live in a fallen world. We live in a world that is full of greed and selfishness and people chasing after things for themselves more than caring for their neighbors. And I think it's a consequence, honestly, from my perspective, of sin. It's choosing to live apart from God and the way that He's called us to live. So I think it's a natural consequence. I don't think God caused it. I think that our individual choices often cause heartache in our lives. And I'm not blaming individuals for each thing that happens to them, but just in general, I believe we live in a world that's broken, but that ultimately we broke it and we break it. We still break it today. I also believe strongly that God loves us fully, and that he loves us so much that he sent Jesus, his own son, to be with us in our pain and show us a new way to live, and offer us forgiveness of sins, but also showing us that we can live in a way that reverses the brokenness that we created. So I think he is with us. He is for us. He loves us, and he's inviting us into a new way to live. That's the shortest way I can say, give you my
Yeah,
theological take.
that's amazing. Well, I had I had an incident I don't know how many years ago now when we had to put my dog down. This is grief, putting your dog down.
Oh,
And it
certainly
was
is.
like a beautiful little Pomeranian Maltese chase that was like Ed and our baby. And we had put down a few dogs before that, and which
Yeah.
was difficult, but this one was really, really hard. And again, with the whole faith thing, you might find this interesting. My husband couldn't deal with it. He ended up going to work, and I said, let me, for once in my life, be the strong one in the marriage. I will deal with the dog, because my husband was just really struggled with it. I had the vet come over to the house, and but then I honestly, Neil, I couldn't do it. So I had the dog downstairs. I went up to my bedroom and I said, can you give me some time? Can you give me some time? I went up to my bedroom and I leaned on the counter in my bathroom, and I said, okay, God, I need strength because I can't do this. I can't do this. And then I waited. And I was like, hello, I'm talking to you finally. Like, that's how
Yeah.
I felt.
Yeah.
I'm finally talking to you. You can at least answer. And I almost had a fight. I
Yeah.
was so upset. And I
Yeah.
said, then I'm like, give me strength right now. I need it. I can't go put this dog down. I can't. Like, and then nothing happened. And I felt so upset and I think I just almost yelled, like, just give me strength. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh. So I don't know what I was waiting to happen. And
Yeah.
when I look back now, I said, what was I going to get muscles? What was going to happen? And then out of nowhere, as clear as day, this voice said, you already have it. It's in you. And I was like, what? That's your answer?
You're like, you gave it?
I honestly felt like I already have it. And I was just like, oh, whatever. I said, fine. And I went downstairs and I took that dog and I brought the dog up. And I said, we do this in my bed. And I laid in the bed with this beautiful little dog. And it actually was a beautiful experience when I held that dog while the vet was there and put it to sleep. And afterwards, I looked back on it and I thought, wow, what else would the answer have been to that question, or give me strength? There's no other answer except the words, you have it in you already. I
Yes.
just didn't know.
I think that's fascinating. I've had very interesting experiences like that too. And trust me, even as a pastor, like, I think some people think, I've heard people say, well, pray for me because you have more credibility with God than I do. And I'm like, oh, sorry. I wish that were true, but it's not. It's not. I'm not closer to God by being a pastor than anybody else that calls on his name. And so oftentimes I've wrestled with God myself and asked for something, and I expect it to come in a certain way. And then I look back and I don't necessarily hear a voice, but I'll look back and realize I got it. It just came in a different form than I was looking for. And to me, it's, again, I want to figure things out. I want to figure out exactly how God works, how he answers prayers, and then he always goes a different route than I anticipated. And then I'm just like, yeah, okay, I get it. I'm trying to figure everything out. You're more mysterious than me. You're bigger than me. You're smarter than me. I get it. But that's, to me, that's what a beautiful experience you had.
I love that about you. You're just so real and just honest and real, and because we're all human, and that's
Yeah.
what life is, learning. It's a journey.
Yes.
But I have remembered that moment because I all of us have a strength in us that is so great that we don't, the strength inside of us to get
Yes.
through things and to move forward and to overcome adversity and to learn and grow and be better. and more loving towards each other. It's the process of being human
Yes.
experience. And just because of that one moment, I've gone back to that a few times in my life and saying, you don't realize how much strength we have,
We don't, but it takes going through adversity to build strength, just like it takes going to the gym to build muscles. No one gets stronger from the mountaintop experiences in life. We get stronger climbing the mountain. And sometimes God, I feel like, shows us a way through where we get a little bit of an escape route. And those are great moments. But more often than not, my experience has been, I still go through all the hard things. It's just I have a bunch of times that I can look back in my life now where I really can see that he walked with me through it. So that gives me trust that he's going to do it again. So if he did it before, he'll do it again. And I realize that his faithfulness is not conditioned on how good I am or how right I do things. It's just conditioned on he's good and he loves us.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I think about, yes, that beautiful man, Michael, that lost his family. And I think I was listening to the eulogy that at their service, and his sister did it. And she put the memory of his girls and his need to help others honor their memory is what's going to get him through. And I was like, and people will never be the same. Like that man will never be the same, but
right.
You can't change the past. You can only move forward and love. And the last thing you'd ever want to do if you lost a family member is to have their passing, their death. The last thing you want is for that to make you a bitter, angry person. Like if I passed away, I would want my husband, I wouldn't want him to be miserable and upset. I wouldn't want, I think we all still want our loved ones to live a big life and be amazing, and right?
Yes. Oh yes. I couldn't agree more. It's like that's what love really looks like. It looks like hoping for someone else to thrive, even if you don't. Even if all hell breaks loose in your own life, you still want the people around you to make it and to do better than you did. And that's a beautiful sacrificial kind of love. And I believe that love comes directly from God. And we can't manufacture that kind of love on our own. We tend to be transactional in our relationships at our most base level. But God has a love for us that's bigger than that. And I believe he can give that to us too. Yeah.
Well, you're amazing. We could probably keep talking about this.
This is great stuff. It's super important, and you're bringing up you're just bringing up such good issues. These are real life things that people go through. I think one last thing I'd love to say to people going through grief is really be gentle, be kind to yourself, give yourself grace as you go through grief. If you're not crying, that doesn't mean you're broken. Not everybody expresses grief through crying. If you're having a hard time sleeping, don't panic about it. That's probably a very normal thing. If you're sleeping a little too much, that's okay too. Give yourself a lot of grace in the process. Make sure to participate in self-care. Make sure you're eating well. That's super important when you're going through grief. Your body's already getting depleted. So fuel yourself well. Make sure you hydrate. Get as much rest as possible. And for the people surrounding you, just give them space, but also get close to them when they need and walk through it with them. Grief will change you, but you absolutely can come out on the other side. Never the same, but you can make it, and you can have a thriving, successful life still, for sure.
Amazing. And it's amazing grace, hey? That's what it's all about.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
And being somehow, I think, in the depth of grief, to find the ability to be grateful for the simple little things. I think just little, and there is that when people are really going through grief, that what is your win for today? It might be that you showered, and
Yes.
that's okay. Like if all you got through is to eat a healthy breakfast or get out of bed and shower, then look at the end of the day, go, I won today. I showered. The
Yes.
small wins, right?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. It's still a victory. It really takes it out of you. It's like running marathons constantly. It's like not having oxygen, and there's no oxygen in the world that can actually fix you. It's a deep, emotional, pain-filled experience, and yet, if you short circuit it by numbing yourself, if you short circuit it by refusing to have the feelings, it will take you to deeper, more despairing places. So that's why it's so important to not ignore it and to walk into it with people that you trust and care about.
Yeah. And to reach out to people and just try to be grateful and
Yes.
love, have people around you. And that, like that quote, I'm just going to end with that again, because I think it's amazing. When we lose someone we love, we must learn not to live without them, but to live with the love that they left behind. Because you want to celebrate the people you lost, how much you love them, and that, you're grateful for having had them in your life, right?
Totally. And one of the best things, I think one of the most honoring things we can do of our family is when there's been someone in your family or a good friend that's passed on, the greatest thing that you can do to honor them is to exemplify their best qualities in your life. So if you saw something in them that you really respect and admire, practice those things, because you learn them from that person. And what a great way to say that you're carrying on their legacy by practicing the things that you watch them do. And then you can pass those on to people, and create a legacy throughout the generations.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness. I love that. I love it. Thank you so much.
Oh, of course. Of course. Thank you
Okay.
for having these great conversations.
Yeah, it's I'm sure we'll do more. You're incredible, and I just hope that anyone that is going through grief, I hope this helps you, and that definitely you can reach out. Reach out to Neil or me, and
Yeah.
would love to have a conversation. But
Yeah.
okay,
I'm always up for that. So thank you.
all right. Thank you so much, Neil. Appreciate you. And
Thank you
thanks
so
for
much,
listening.
Jane.
Okay, bye.
Bye.